My name's Jeff St Laurent. This is the live Tuesday call. Before we get rolling on this, just a few points of business. I always record these calls. Any past recordings are on my website, sellingcoaching.com, under the university. There's a bunch of other shorter videos there as well, education, and that's my main hub for helping you transition to a full-time business. That's what I do. Working with those coaches to really move yourself forward. I do one-on-one mentoring. I have a great group mentoring program as well. So if you're in a position where you know you require some guidance, consider reaching out to me and we can create a conversation and just see where it goes. It's just a relaxed conversation. And you can always do that from my website, sellingcoaching.com, under the work with me. Right at the bottom, there's a great little form there you can fill out and we can always go from there. Last point of business before we get rolling as well is I have a great private Facebook group at my website, sellingcoaching.com. Just right at the top of every page, you're going to see a little banner that says join my private Facebook group. Click that, it'll bring you over there. Just at least consider checking it out if you're not there. We got some great stuff going on in there. Always great community of coaches. We're closing in on 1,000 now. So I don't even remember, 950 or something like that. But so an exciting little landmark right there. But we're closing in on 1,000 coaches coming up. So we've got a great self-defined visibility challenge going on where you can create 30 videos over 91 days, helping you get your message out there. And of course, just a great connection. And so I can connect with you and get to know people as well. But with that being said, let's jump right into this today. And today is all about understanding our value as a coach. And not just so we can understand that value, but so we can get paid. We can get those paying clients. And this is a big piece. I mean, I remember when I started off coaching and I went to a coaching school back in 2003, 2004 is when I graduated, and I quickly transitioned out of the fitness industry into coaching and went full time and have never looked back since. And it's been my main thing for quite a while now. But I remember the struggles I've had along the way, and I want to echo this with the coaches that are out there that are feeling like this, because it's a normal feeling to not really understand your value in the market. One of my great mentors, Jim Rohn, defines the law of compensation, and the law of compensation as defined is we get paid for the value that we bring to the marketplace. And as an entrepreneur, what brings that value is us. We are the value. And so oftentimes it can be really challenging especially if we're not quite believing in ourselves and who we are as a person and who we represent, just in the world, never mind business, but in the world as just a human being with purpose and fulfillment and strong relationships around us. Because the reality of the world is, and being honest with everybody, right? We all have our struggles at different times, much more than others, and more than one area at different times. So those are all different challenges that especially can affect us as coaches, because even as you start off, there can be this thought that, well, gosh, I'm a coach, and I need to have it all together, and I need to be a good role model in this. I remember when I published my book, Being Fulfilled, back in 2009, and here I am writing a book on being fulfilled. That's the name of the book, Being Fulfilled. And I'm a month away from getting my book in my hands. It's going out to the publisher. And I'm like, my life sucks. And I was having one of those, days or weeks or whatever it was. And I'm like, who am I to publish a book on being fulfilled when I'm not even fulfilled myself right now? And that's when I realized I'm like, wow, fulfillment isn't like a state where you just get to and you stay. It's just a constant piece of work. And that's where the same thing comes with our value. As our value as a coach is one of the people, before we started off with, the kind of statement was, we've been doing it for a while. And it's like, even once you realize your value, what it's going to be is it's going to be a constant work in keeping that in front of you and reminding yourself of what that is. And so it'd be important once you get there, to have some strategies to keep that in place. I have a folder in my email. It's called Fuel, so F-U-E-L. And in that folder are things that fuel me up. And there are some really positive things. There are some negative things, like emails from clients, when they didn't hire me, great, powerful testimonials from people that just really moved me for whatever reason, based on what they said. It could be just from longtime friends or business colleagues that I've worked with over time, not as a client per se, but when I was in the fitness industry. of just what I've meant for them and what I've done for them. Some things like when I got rejected for different events that I've done, or when I've tried to get my book into different spots, etc., and different venues where it would sell it, and they just basically were saying why it wasn't good enough and why it wasn't going to work. And all those things fuel me up because it either motivates me in a way that, oh, I want to do better, or it motivates me in a way of reminds me of my value. So those are some of my ways to remind me and anchor myself of my value. And additionally, often what I find is it's very easy for us to get pulled away from our value, even if we feel we haven't really found it yet as a coach, and mostly because when you're a coach, you're immersed in the coach's world. And there's coaches everywhere, and you're signed up to email lists and different groups and different venues of all these other coaches who are coaching coaches and these gurus who are giving you all this information. And it's very easy to compare yourself to other people who have been doing it longer, who have created greater success than you. And it almost feels at times that you're doing nothing, or you're doing nothing good, or what, am I ever going to do anything great? And even to this day, I've found that even for myself, who's been at it, since 2003, 2004, I still have those moments, but I have a lot less of them now because another way that I've used, and I'm sharing this stuff with you all, so you can start to understand the importance of having these anchors, like my fuel folder, and then also there'll be often times where I'll go to my own website. I'll go to the things that I've done online. I'll watch a video that I've done. I'll go to my Facebook group and look around and comment and things like that. That's why I do those things on a daily basis, because it reminds me of my value. It reminds me of what I'm doing that's great. And I stay away from, doesn't mean I don't ever go to different coaches' websites, etc., because I do that stuff to see what's going on in the industry, see what other people are teaching, see what other coaches are exposed to, so forth and so on. I want to be current, and I want to understand what challenges are and what people are being exposed to in terms of what other people are selling them. But I'm really important to always ground myself in my own work and be proud of what I've done and what I'm currently doing. And that's really important. And again, this is all things that, again, anchor me and allow me to say like, wow, I'm doing a great job and I'm proud of myself and I am valuable and I'm doing well and I am helping people. And that's so vitally important. And I'll translate that to you now, and whether you haven't even started your coaching business and you're just thinking about it, maybe you're going through a school or you haven't done anything with it yet and you're just enamored with the idea of it, or whether you've been doing it for 1, 2, or many, many years. What I'd say is, especially for the people who haven't done it yet, is that especially when you don't have that proof, in other words, like you don't have the testimonial, maybe you don't have the website, you don't have the community that you've built, you don't have the interaction with the people or the book that you wrote or whatever it is. So it's starting to look at, I like to call it the evidence. I still have some life coaching clients, that I'm not working with them with their business. Even with coaches that hire me, sometimes they want to move forward with their business, but we, 3-4 weeks in, we realize like, wow, we got to work more on their world before they can really focus and be consistent with their business. And one of the things I always work with them on is especially when they're struggling or challenged with certain areas, is it's so easy to pull up the negative things or why things aren't working in our lives. And all of us are very conscious people, on the call today. And as you listen to this, we're developing ourselves. So we're conscious about these things, but it's still very easy, even as developed and conscious as we all are, to be down on ourselves, to be negative on ourselves, to have those limiting beliefs, the voices in our head telling us that we're not good enough, that we can't do things, or this is never going to work, all right, or I'm never going to succeed, or I'm going to fail. And it's those aspects we start to point out all the evidence as to why it's not going to work, because we ask ourselves those questions like, why am I so stupid? Why isn't this never work for me? What's wrong with me? Right? If there's any stupid question, I always say those are stupid questions, because what's the answer to why do I suck so much? Well, let me bullet point the reasons. Well, now you've got all your evidence. So in other words, when I work with the life coaching clients and things like that, one of the things I often do is start to take a look at the evidence supporting what we want and what we're going for. And if there's not, even in situations like you're starting off as a new coach, when there might not be any evidence supporting that you're a great coach and that you are valuable, what I'd like you to do is to start to look at, so some of the things that you have done in your life, some of the things where you have created your successes. Where have your wins been? And it's not just big wins, it's wins of all different kinds. The micro wins that happen on a daily basis that most people tend to overlook, and also the big wins that, the ones that you would obviously celebrate and be excited and happy about. And sometimes it's a matter of even taking that time to list some of those things down and immerse yourself in those things. Start to take a look at, what characteristics, what skill sets, what talents or gifts, what things that I have to work on that got me to these wins, big or small, and starting to look to those characteristics and then ask yourself, how can I begin to utilize some of those characteristics in my business? Where your value is going to begin to come from is you believing in yourself. So your value as a coach and that confidence that you have, even in a situation where you don't necessarily feel confident because you're going into new areas. It's having confidence in yourself that, hey, you know what? I've done things like this before and I've succeeded. In other words, when I've had challenges in front of me, when I've gone into new areas, I've succeeded at this. And yes, it's new, and yes, it's scary, and yes, I'm lacking the specific belief, but now you can start to anchor yourself from other areas. And again, if it's not easy to find that stuff, that's why you take the time to list some of it out and think about it and find out, where have you created these successes and how can I translate this into this new area? And that's going to begin that journey of you starting to get yourself out there and starting to believe in what you're bringing to the table. As a coach, and I remember very specifically when I was struggling with this, sometimes, not sometimes, but we love coaching, right? We've all had an experience or experiences where, coaching, this is the best thing in the world, and most likely we've gotten coached, and we've had these breakthrough moments, and that's what happens. We fall in love with coaching, and as a result, then we would say, hey, I want to bring this to other people. I want to help others with this. This would be fantastic. And so when we do that, oftentimes when we get immersed in it, and then all of a sudden, as we start our business, as we go into our business, we're told we have to define it better. We've got to narrow our niche down and who we're helping with what specifically. And it takes something that's very ambiguous as it is, right? Coaching is a very ambiguous service. It really can't be explained, but rather it's got to be experienced. How do you explain, a Ferrari that's at the end of the day a car? Well, you have to drive it and go, oh, now I get it. That's the difference. But even coaching, it's on another level. It's experiential versus, descriptive. So a lot of people now, you've got to somehow start to describe it and say, well, when someone asks you, well, what do you do? Well, what do you say? Now you've got to write something on your website that kind of summarizes what you offer and what you do. And it's like, well, how do I start to do this? And we can almost get lost. I remember I would get lost in this, like, what am I even doing? Like, what the heck am I even doing? People I'm talking with them on the phone, and like, what's actually happening? Like, and you, if you get too logical about it, like, I would start to go insane sometimes, like, and then my whole world would come crashing down because I put so much into this coaching thing, and I was so excited about it. But then I'm like, what am I even really excited about? I wouldn't even know what the heck it was. And then from there, it's not a good road. So today I want to back away from all that logical stuff, from all the, how do we start to describe this into words on a website or in a conversation with someone. And rather, I want to go back to where we start to understand our value as a coach is I want to go back to the place of where I said it's experiential. It's experiential, and I also want to go to the place, and this is to me a foundational element of being a coach, is that as a coach, we're not the expert in anything besides the coaching process. It's not our agenda with a client, it's the client's agenda. It's what they want, what they need, what they're going for. And all we're doing there, we're not coming in as the expert in their world or with any specific pieces. Even if we're saying as a coach, we're working with a specific demographic to do some specific things, right? We might have had some experience with that. We might have had some places with that. But even with that being said, the best avenue to remember is that we're a coach. And the only thing that you want to be good at is the coaching skill sets, asking questions and listening, and realizing that the more I do that, It doesn't mean I'm getting better necessarily. Yes, we get better at coaching, but really what happens is well, we start to gain more confidence because we've done it more. However, it doesn't mean that it's not valuable from the very beginning. Even if you're not a certified coach, even if you never went through a school or something like that, there are plenty of times where you can just, you've spoken to a person before, and maybe it wasn't with certain techniques or certain questions or doing it a certain way that you might have learned in a school or whatever, but as a result of that conversation with somebody, whatever you ended up doing, even if it was just listening to somebody, there was value for that person. And so it's starting off on that plane of starting to recognize that what we do, the only expertise that we have is as being a coach. So it's letting go of outcomes. It's letting go of where we're going with things. It's letting go of writing things down and trying to define it, but rather starting to work with people. And if we start off as speaking engagements, if we start, sometimes people start off coaching for free. We start to ask questions and we start to understand what people want. So here's where I'm going to go into this premise here of understanding our value is I want to get down to the place where the value, for us to translate our value is, how about this? I'll say it's impossible. We could say as much as we want to say or write as much as we want to write or try and answer questions as much as we want to answer. However, it is not our job to define our value or understand what our value is in terms of the people we work with. And you're saying like, well, Jeff, this whole call is about understanding your value, and you're saying it's not our job to understand our value. Okay, so what am I going to say next? So now we say where we understand our value is through other people. In other words, where's my value for this person? You can't define that. The only way you're going to find that out is by talking with that person and listening and asking questions. If you have some sort of an interaction, it's asking, what was the value? What value did you receive from our conversation? What was the biggest benefit you had from it? When I end this call, I like to have a little bit of time to, ask any questions. Do I need to elaborate on anything? But also one of the things I say is well, what did you get from the call? What did you receive from it? What was the biggest takeaway from it? I want to start to understand the value of what I'm teaching. What are some of the biggest takeaways? Are there some threads or themes? At the end of coaching calls or at the beginning of every coaching call, and those of you that are my mentors or, one-on-one or group, the first thing I'll always ask is, I don't care how many sessions we're in. I've got clients that I've worked with well over 100 sessions, 150 sessions, some of them, over many years. And, the first thing I do, I sit down with them. It's like, so what are we getting out of today? What are you looking for? What are you hoping to achieve by the end of our time together? And I understand why we're together. I understand the bigger objective, but I also want to understand, where's the value for you today? Because I don't want to guess. I don't want to assume. And so I ask. And so I want to help take some of the pressure off of you as you start to interact with people, right? And this is before you even get the client, right? When you start to interact with people, when you start to create conversations, first off, we don't have to translate our value in terms of trying to describe it at an event or in a conversation or on our website. Where value comes from what we do is through what we teach. Like today's call, for instance, there's a certain value attached to it. I don't know what that value is. I can assume some of that value, but I know from my interactions with the people I work with, how I felt over the years, that this would be a valuable call. But where it all reigns, or how valuable for each one of you is going to be different based on where you are and what you're receiving from the information. But part of it is what I understand is that as I do things like this, as I get in my Facebook group, and I'm talking about the things that I do, so I want you to, as you listen to this, don't be like, oh, this is what Jeff does. Think about it like, these are the things that I can be doing, and understand how the value comes from that. So in other words, what I've understood by asking people, by being curious, I ask everybody, I ask so many times, what did you receive? Even people that have hired me, why did you hire me? What created the decision? Anything to understand their process of buying and value. is so as I do these calls, as I put the calls out, as I send emails out, as I'm interacting with the Facebook group, as I comment on videos, and a lot of the other things that I do in my business where I interact and help people, Facebook Messenger and all those other aspects of it, what I understand is that's building value for people. I'm not explaining how I help you as a mentor coach specifically. However, what happens is by listening to the information, you start to get an idea of how I roll, how I work, how I educate, my knowledge, my expertise, my background, etc., my philosophies, my values, my energy, my tone, my pacing. And intrinsically, you start to build a certain value for Jeff and what he does. And you start to understand how I could assist you. But I don't have to say anything specifically about it. Sure, I can say at the beginning of a call, hey, I'm available for one-on-one mentoring. I'm also in my mentoring group. Check out my website, blah, 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 right? I can make you aware of it. I can point you in a direction, right? But that doesn't even matter. The only reason why you'd go to, let's say, the Work With Me page, or why someone would go to your Work With Me page, isn't because they want to read about what's there necessarily that you've described so well. That's actually irrelevant. When they're actually motivated to go there, it's because some interaction with you, be it at a live event or virtual or however it was, how they came across you, there was something about you, that what you did, what you said, what you helped them with, that was valuable for them. And once it becomes valuable to the point where they're like, maybe I could work with this person. Maybe this person could help me. And they start to get curious, either through what they're hearing you say, whether it's just even a mention of, hey, I do one-on-one coaching, I do blah, 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 or just through that intrinsic value that's built through the education that you're sharing. That's where people start to build that value in terms of how you can assist them. Now, you don't know what that is yet, right? You don't know what that is. However, what I want you to do is know that as you start to communicate, and this is why I'm a big advocate of videos and doing live calls like this or Facebook Lives or whatever that is on a weekly basis. And some of you that are working a full-time job still outside of coaching, it's like, hey, you can do a Facebook Live for 5 minutes a week. You know what I mean? So your weekly event doesn't have to be an hour call like this. So there's really no excuse in terms of, well, I don't have the time to do that. Like, you could broadcast it at 3 a.m. if you needed to, and even if no one watches, at least you've done something. So the point aspect of being is as you start to do this stuff, you don't necessarily know the value, but you're putting that out to your audience. And as you start to build an audience, they're there for a reason. They stay for a reason. And so through those interactions, I'm asking you is to understand, number one, is that people just by doing those on a consistent basis and by people being there, there's going to start to build value for them. Just like I said, like with me, like for all of you listening to this, whether recording or live, there's some value for you being here. There's some value that's starting to build, whether you've already hired me or maybe you'd even be considering it. The point of it is that I'm not forcing that value. I'm just sharing it through what I do, through what I educate, through what I talk about. So understand as you do those things and your community stays there, that value is naturally building. But then your job now is through your interactions, and as you know, I'm a big advocate of interacting with people and emailing with people. And those of you that are on my email community, you'll get emails at least 3 times from me a week. Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, inviting to the calls, talking about sharing some things about myself or other aspects that tie into lessons. You might get even a 4th email on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So I'm in front of you. I'm in my Facebook group. I'm commenting. I'm messaging people, replying to them, asking questions. I'm curious why they're there. Why did they join my group? What's their motivation for being there? What are they doing in their world right now? Things like that. Anytime someone comments on something, what is it that you liked about it? Even if someone comments on a video, I head over to Messenger and on Facebook, and I'll be like, hey, I noticed you benefited from this, or after this call, I tag people's names that are on the call that at least that I know that are there, and I'll tag them in my Facebook group if they're in the Facebook group. Hey, thanks so much for attending, and what did you receive from this? And depending on who's there and how well or not I know them, and what they're going through. I might follow up with someone on Messenger and be like, hey, I noticed that you talked about X, Y, and Z and how this was really helpful. I mean, why specifically was it helpful? Where are you at in your business right now where this is important to you? So I want to just understand those things. This does two things. Like, not only does this help you understand the value in terms of what you're delivering in terms of your education and how people are receiving it, but it also helps you understand your market better, if you will, your market research. There's a lot of people that do market research and they start to, understand their audience, but there's no better market research than starting to actually interact with people as opposed to reading about it. Meaning, that's why, like I said, I'm finishing the thought, is I'm a big advocate of, doing videos and doing those live calls, because that gets you out there and it starts to stir up something, and something is maybe never as much as you want it to be in terms of actions or comments or likes or responses, etc. But it's starting to articulate that language and start to develop your message. So not only you start to feel confident and more fluent in it as well, but you start to see who you attract. And when you start to see who you attract, you can start to understand, is this the right type of audience? Are these the right type of people that you want to help? So hopefully you're starting to get a better feel in terms of, I approach value in a very different way, necessarily in the sense of not only reminding ourselves of what we are and who we are as a person and what we bring to the table, whether we've experienced or not, but more understanding value from the eyes of the consumer, because we can never sell, when it comes to selling, right? We can never sell anyone anything that they don't want. And to understand if someone wants something, we first have to understand if they need something. And that means that they've got to be going through something in their world that we could help them with as a coach. And with that being said, is that's the only way we're going to find that out is through creating conversations. And last week on the call, I talked about, creating, or a couple weeks on the call, creating understanding the value of somebody, before we approach them. I actually did it on a Facebook Live pop-up show, where, we don't approach anybody till we understand their need and their timing of that need. In other words, that's the value for something that we offer. And only then is when we start to approach them. That's the only time when we would actually ask them if they consider working with us. And even if they say yes, even if they're going down that road and they're looking for some help, we want to start to ask them more in terms of, well, why would that be appealing for you? What value would you see in having someone like myself, in your life? What are you looking for right now? Oh, you're looking for accountability, or you're looking for someone to listen to you or bounce some ideas off of, or, you fill in the blank. So as you start to listen to that, you start to understand what is valuable to somebody. And the only thing that you've got to understand at this point is kind of, well, what can you do as a coach? What can you do? You can hold people accountable. You can listen to them. You can be not judgmental. And I'm just talking on a very general basis, right? You can be detached from their agenda. You detach from their world, so it's almost like you don't exist in their world. You could be that person that they can open up to and confide in and say things that they've never said to any human being in the world. I've always found that fascinating when I get to have the opportunity to speak with clients, and they say some things, and I'm like, wow, I'm curious. Have you ever said this out loud in the first place, but never mind just out loud, but out loud to anybody else? And I mean, there are some things that people have shared with me they've never even said out loud to nobody, never mind any out loud to somebody else. So these are, think about that. To be able to say those things and not be judged on that, that's powerful peace. And that in lies the premise for the value that we bring to the table. And even just understanding the philosophy of that is another way, when I translate, when we talk about value, one thing that helped me tremendously was, when I went through coaching school, when I started coaching, like I said, I loved coaching, but there was that value piece that I was like, oh, well, what do I actually help people with? And what helped me is that when I actually started working with some mentors, this is a big thing for me. I remember the first time I hired actually a coach myself, and it was a mentor coach. And I remember I was paying $500 a call, and this was back, let's say 10 years ago or more. And I certainly didn't have just $500 a call lying around. um, but there was something about that person that I just knew I had to work with. Like if I wanted to advance my business, there was something that I believed in that just allowed me to just pull my credit card out and do it. And that was actually the best thing I ever did, because what it taught me is that I'm now paying more money than I ever thought I would pay to anybody for like an hour's worth of time, right? And like I'm breaking it down to a very logistical black and white thing. Like I'm on the phone with someone for an hour and I'm paying them $500. Well, what possibly could you get from them? You know what I mean? You know, even as coaches, like we can think about that. If we break it down logically, like what possibly could happen in that time frame where someone would pay X amount of hundreds of dollars. You know, but I did that, and I remember as a result of that and what I started doing in my business and what I started to learn and understand, and then I would start to pay money. I mean, with my mentor, like he would do events. I would pay to fly myself out to his events, and I would sit by his table with his products and CDs and books and things like that after he would speak, and I would listen to him speak with people and close people and create sales. And that's how I became so curious and excited about selling and the art of it, because I'm like it's like magic. Like, what is he doing? How does he do this? And I would try it. And I'm like, I'm not good at this. This is horrible. I gotta better myself. But until I started paying that money, investing that money in myself and what I was doing for something also that was so intangible, right? I mean, I could pay $2,000 to fly myself out to California to go to an event with hotel and blah blah blah, to listen to somebody, and then, but there was no, like, I didn't walk home with like clients or things like that. So I had to translate that into results. But what I found through doing that is I started to understand from a consumer's perspective the value in mentoring and coaching in the way that they did those things. And that was a big thing for me, is because that's what allowed me to start to take my rates of where I started off at, like, I think it was like $75 a session, whatever. I remember I moved them to like 100 or 125. I was at 150 for a while, and I moved up from there. But I remember I was so, just like anybody else, right? I was so hesitant to charge more. And I'm like, oh my God, is someone gonna pay this? Is someone gonna really pay me $100 for a phone call? But then I started to realize it, because I was doing it myself, right? I was investing, and I'm like, wow, I can see how this could be really helpful for somebody. That helped with my belief. I always believed in coaching in and of itself. But now when I did it myself, I started to believe, like, wow, now I can see why someone would pay more money than they have, so to speak, right? Because the one thing I always teach is it's never about the money. It's never about the money, ever. It's never about the money. And you can say, well, Jeff, but there are some people. No, it doesn't matter, because I'll tell you what. They will hang up the phone. They will say they don't have the money. They will say things are tight, but it's bullshit. It's bullshit, because the next thing you do, they're going to hang up the phone, and then they're going to go out to dinner. They're going to do this, and they're going to go buy this, and they're going to pay for this, and they're going to find ways to do stuff that they don't need to do. However, they want to do those things, or it's a desire, or it's a whim, or it's whatever it is, and they're going to spend more money that they don't have because they see value in it and they want it. And whether that value is a warranted thing, meaning it's just a spur of the moment to fill a void in their life, or it's like they really need it and want it and been dreaming about it for years, whether they've saved up for it, or they borrowed it, they stole to get it, or whatever it is, they go for it. And we all understand that, because we've all done that in our life. It's never about that money. And so we start to understand that from that perspective. So what I'm saying to you is, I'm not saying, oh, just go hire mentors, go hire coaches for the sake of hiring them. However, I would say, if you're not working with somebody like that, find someone that's appropriate for you. It doesn't have to be me, wherever you are in your life. But the point is that when you do that, you're going to start to experience what that means. In other words, when you, quote, don't have the money, meaning no one has the money when they don't see any value there, right? So if you're going to purchase something, it's like you're not going to purchase it or even consider it if you have no need for it, or if you don't want it, or even if you need it or want it and the timing's not there, you're not going to go extend yourself or do something above and beyond what you can or should do, for that matter. But when you're in that spot and you see that value, find somebody and go for it. See what it's like. You know, I'm not saying you're going to have a great experience all the time. I've worked with some people that I've worked with other people in the past, and they haven't had great experiences. And they've come to me and they're like, oh, I don't want to hire another mentor coach and spend another $2,000 or whatever it is to work with someone and not get anything out of it, not get results from it, or feel like it's more general stuff then, you know. And so I've had a lot of people that have invested a lot of money in people but haven't gotten that value. And what I found is those people often have more challenges in valuing their own services because, yes, they believe in coaching, but then, well, who's going to pay for something like this? So until you start to do that, that's when it really makes a big shift. So really, that's part of my message there is that's going to be a big indicator in terms of how you can help and how you can start to understand that. And lastly, as we finish this up, I just want to wrap back to something I talked about a little bit. But in terms of understanding your audience is, you know, not just why do people buy, but why do my people buy? You know, what's valuable to them? And understanding that, you know, I talk a lot about your headline. Other people call it a niche, but I say, what's your headline? You know, like on your website when you go and it says helping who with what specifically. And that's a big aspect and framework to our business. And even if you can't get there right away, it's all right. You can still start moving. But once you get there, that helping who is one thing, but with what specifically, that's a big aspect because ideally with that what thing you're helping them with, there's an intrinsic value. There's a place to say, well, you can ask yourself, well, would someone actually pay money for help on this? So when I say, for instance, my who with what specifically, helping coaches transition to a full-time business. So I would ask myself, you know, would a coach pay money to someone like myself to help them transition to a full-time business? Right? Absolutely. Well, I know I've done it. I know there are many other people have done it. And then as I began working with it, et cetera, obviously you find that. But so I want you to ask yourself that question. You know, first answer the question, you know, who am I helping with what specifically? But then we've got to get to that place is, you know, instead of why do people buy, why do my people buy? You know, and with what I'm helping them with specifically, are they going to buy that? Are they going to pay money for that? And if you're not quite sure about it, look into it a little bit more. Talk to some people in that area. Not just say, well, would you buy this? Would you, you know, but rather talk to some people in that area. Because again, coaching is experiential. Find out what they're going through. Find out what their needs are. All right. And then we take the same approach that we would with anybody is then we can start to ask them how badly, you know, they're looking to do something about that. You know, how serious are they about moving forward? Have they considered working with somebody like like a coach to help them with that? You know, would they consider working or hiring someone like myself to help you through that? Well, what do you do? Well, I'm a coach, and you're the type of person that I work through. Would you find, if you had some help around this area, if you had some clarity around this area, would that be helpful? If you had some accountability on a week-to-week basis, would you consider looking into that a little bit more to see if it would be valuable for you, right? So in other words, I'm not trying to explain coaching. I talked about, you know, would some accountability be valuable? If you had someone on a week-to-week basis, you know, to help move you forward, so forth and so on, does that sound like it'd be helpful for you? You know, would you consider looking into it a little bit more? You know, that's when we can potentially, if there's yeses, if there's a need there, that's when we can start to get them to a complimentary session. And from there, we can better start to understand our value. And who knows, the whole point of that is hopefully we start to gain them as a client. Hopefully today, you get a better understanding in terms of, you know, where that value can come from. In other words, you can start to borrow it from yourself, right? Even if you haven't done things yet, from evidence from your past and looking at that. Then most importantly is not trying to have to explain it, but rather just to understand that it's being built automatically through you're getting your message out there, even if you don't think it's great enough. And then lastly, obviously, starting to understand that value through other people, through your audience, through interactions and so forth and so on.